All right, Nicole, you're here with me today. And this is a very interesting episode because, you reached out, you heard an episode I did with someone else.
Mhm.
And I always love those when somebody hears it and they go, that was great. I know this person. I would love to be on. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. So thank you for being
Yes.
on.
I don't know if you're similar because I'm also a podcaster and, being a podcaster, you get a bunch of what I'll just call copy and paste pitches where it's like, did you listen to the show? And so
Yeah.
whenever I'm listening to new episodes or finding a show that I'm like, oh, I vibe with this really hard, I always like to connect with the podcaster in some way. And your show really spoke to me and I was like, I want to connect and like be a guest on this show because I just loved your vibe. I loved how you interview people. And I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's my pleasure. I've been fortunate, done so many episodes, and it's been really well received. I think we just try to have a regular conversation.
Yeah.
It's a podcast, but it's really just a conversation. There's no notes, there's no script. It's just two people chatting who don't know each other, and there's something honest about
Yeah.
that, and I'm all about that.
You and me both. We approach podcasting very similarly. I don't know if you feel this way. Like I listen to some shows and I'm like, I can feel the script or the note cards in front of you. And immediately it just feels like it's a one-sided conversation. And if we're, like kicking back, grabbing a cup of coffee or even like grabbing lunch, like it's not, there's no note cards, there's none of that. And I feel like with podcasting, you're just like, you're popping in someone's show and you just want to listen to a conversation that stimulates your mind, that gets you thinking in a new way. And I think that's most beneficially done in this format. So I'm vibing. I'm right with it.
You're vibing. It's good. And I think also too, it's interesting, a podcast talk. I never know where these things go. I just let them go, wherever they're going to go. But I think I'm starting to, now I'm curious about how you feel about this. I'm starting to recognize when I listen to a podcast, if this is kind of put on. And what I mean by is this a hot take for the purpose of a hot take of being viral or saying things that you don't actually believe, but you just do it because you think it'll be a great, if you lack of a better word, ratings for that. I feel like that's becoming more over the top, and I sense it very quickly.
I see that a lot on social media, and it's definitely starting to dip into the podcasting world where, like on social media, like I follow this one couple who are both PhD students. They are big in the health world. And they make these like satirical videos all the time about how people in the health world are like, this has toxins and it'll kill you. And it's just like all of these like really heightened drama words that are solely for clickbait. And I agree with them in the fact that it's like, actually, everything has toxins, technically. Like these things will not kill you in the doses that you're going to be ingesting them. Like, and I think it goes also with podcasting because there's a lot of like, clickbaity BuzzFeed kind of titles to just like pull you in. And I understand downloads. I understand making, the business side of it. I do think that that's important. However, at the sake of honesty, I don't think that that's something that can be traded.
Yeah, no, definitely. I
Yeah.
definitely get that. And I wonder too, like, I just start thinking about stuff. It just pops in my mind. I swear, I just start doing this. It
That's
just goes
fine.
in my mind. This is how it works. But I wonder, like, podcasting in many ways has made everyone a host or a guest of a show,
Mm.
which in the past was reserved for, larger shows, TV, stuff like that. In your mind, what are the pros and cons of kind of democratizing hosting shows, being a guest on shows?
I'm going to start with the pros because I think that those are definitely the dominating factor here. I Speaking from personal experience, I grew up very heavy in the personal development field where it was like all of the heavy gurus were like constantly filling our household. And that was awesome for a lot of reasons. But what I love now about podcasts is being able to pop in a show and hear a normal effing person talk about an experience rather than like just like the best of the best. And I work with a lot of perfectionists, a lot of high achievers specifically, like, they want to be the best in the room. They want to be like this outstanding person. And I definitely have a lot of that still in me. But when I'm able to hear a person's story of them still living up to that excellence that they had in their head, but it's not the best, it's more just an average story. It just reminds me that there is so much more to this world than dominating a field, than being the best. So I like it for I don't love this word, but I'm going to use it in this context, mediocrity almost of it, where you're able to just listen to a normal human being. I also love it because I think that much like, with social media, it allows to give the power back into the people a lot more, like in the 50s, like being on TV was really, really hard to get to. Now become TikTok famous and it's a lot easier. That's obviously much easier said than done. But when it comes to podcasting, it's another medium where you can still be heard. You can still be a creator. You can tap into that creativity part of us without a huge barrier to entry. And I think that is so special that I get why there's millions and millions and millions of podcasts out there.
Gotcha.
I'd love to hear your thoughts though.
I think it's both positive and negative. I think like with anything, there's a cycle of where it becomes like a novel thing. And then, it's kind of weird. It almost operates from like, it's a very have and have not in terms of monetization, in terms of having your voice out there. It's a very have. It allows a lot of freedom to say what you want to say and not have to have a huge platform to say something. Like you could just record something, put it out there. Let's see. In terms of like people making it a large thing for business, it's clear that it's very divided in that it is mainly a very small 1% group of people are making a lot of money from it, and then most podcasters don't make anything, or it's just so getting into it for making money, not the best. It's just not. There's not a lot of support for your mid-level, smaller podcasters. If you just want to like say stuff, and you want to get out what you want to say, it's amazing for that. I think there's a lot of freedom in that, and it shouldn't just be reserved for people who have a larger platform to be able to express their opinions. You should be able to express your opinion, and the democratization of that, I think, is really awesome. But like anything, I'm not someone who's like all in the goodness of it. I question everything that I'm in and that I'm deeply in. And I've been podcasting a long time, 600 plus episodes. There's things I don't like about the industry, and there's a lot of things I do like. I'd like to look at it in both ways for it.
Definitely. I think that when it comes to like the monetization, the business side of it, I don't know if you feel this way. Like everybody and their dog has a podcast nowadays, especially business owners, especially people in, the industry that we're in. And I can tell almost instantly when it's a podcast that is like, this is for my business, and a podcast, this is for the community. And I always strive to make it, this is a podcast for the community. Yes, it does work for my business. It's my favorite part of my business, but I don't feed it as if it's a funnel for the business, because then it becomes monetization heavy. Then it becomes, let me just dribble out a few teasers for you, but not give you the whole thing because you have to join this program. And that to me is just like, that's not my MO. For me, looking at it as this is so that you, someone who maybe has never heard of perfectionism in this context or never heard of something in this context in this way, you can get this information. And I've had people reach out to me and like, I have a folder on my phone saved just because on, those bad entrepreneur days where you're like, I need just a hug. So I have a folder saved on my phone of just screenshots of all the messages that I've received from listeners that are like, you've changed my life with the show. This episode was so eye-opening. And that's why I do this. And I think when you hold that as the mission, it makes the growth of a podcast a lot more worth it and a lot more, okay, let me look at this as a journey rather than get the outcome, which tends to be more monetization based, which podcasting is a slow burn. It is a slow growth. And I don't think a lot of people hear that nowadays. And they like go and they do 10 episodes and they're like, why am I not growing? And it's like, because you have to do 400. You gotta do it slow. That's how it works.
I mean, that's most things in life. I mean, it is that
Yeah.
good things take a while. And I think we're
Mhm.
trying to fast forward past the process of a lot of things. So, and I think it's important, like if you're out there listening, to this and about podcasting, especially if you're going to get into it, I think the other thing you have to have some self-reflection about, like, especially if you're going to be a host, you have to like recognize that you can improve as a host and stuff. But I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'm not trying to be negative here, but like, there's not a lot of great hosts, in my opinion. There's a lot of people
Mhm.
hosting a podcast, but being a great host revolves putting in a lot of reps. And then you have to look at yourself
Yeah.
and like, do I have kind of the charisma for this? Do I have the, like, a people want to
Mhm.
actually listen to me? Or is this just kind of like for me and my friends or whatever? Like, that doesn't matter how great you are asking questions and things that nature, And so I'm a big, believer in like self-reflection, being critical of your performance, realize like, is this something you feel like you would end up doing for a while versus putting all this effort? A lot of people get into podcasts and they don't realize the effort that's involved. It's
Mhm.
not just doing this, what you and I are doing, it's everything that happens after that, building up a list of people to chat with, and then deciding too, like, how do I want to get this out there? Do I want to use social media? Do I want to use other means? You don't have to use social media. I like to tell people this, like,
Mm.
I'm going to be your counter. I'm going to
Yeah.
be the voice on your other shoulder here. You are not required to use this. Even if everyone tells you,
Mhm.
you are not required. Be true to yourself. Do what you would like to do. And,
I had a coach I worked with. She mega successful by the 21st century definition that we've created around it. And she doesn't have a single social media platform. She just has a podcast. Actually, she has two podcasts, one for fun and one for business.
yeah.
And her business doubles every year. And she's like, you do not need social media. And I definitely concur. I like it as a means to like connect with people. But I have very, very strict boundaries with me around social media because that is one slippery slope that can fall down the rabbit hole real fast. So for me, I'm also a very disciplined person, so that's easy for me to say, but
Yeah.
having those boundaries, I mean, like there's apps that can lock you out of your social media if you've used it more than 30 minutes a day,
Yeah.
like, and I love that. You mentioned being a good host, and I want to talk to you about that for a second, because what would you say, like tangibles wise, what would you say makes a good podcasting host other than self-reflection?
Yeah. Well, one, I think in the self-reflection is like, if you need to have notes and stuff like that, I would never tell you to do what I do, which is essentially just wing it with everyone. If like you're going to have massive anxiety from it, and and there's some positive nature to have that in exercise term, hormesis. From that, you need to have some resistance and do things that are a little uncomfortable for you. But if
Mhm.
it's like overwhelmingly like crushing for you to not to just wing it, then have some notes and things of that nature for that. So I would say, know yourself. Like, if you're going to host, are you
Yeah.
someone that needs the questions? You need to have it like real, you need to be super prepped for it. Or are you someone that can just go in and just wing it and just, you're a natural conversationalist? You can meet random strangers and you just go for it and just start having a conversation. I think that's
Mhm.
that's kind of ground zero for hosting, is how do you plan on existing
Interesting.
in that versus just going into it. Like, no, as I have guests that way who come on and go, are you gonna have notes? Are you gonna all this stuff? I'm like, no. And they're like, I feel like I need the notes. I'm like, then this isn't for you. I'm like, this is just a
Mhm.
regular
Yeah.
conversation. There's no notes in life. You don't get notes for how to be an amazing parent. You can read a book, but it will not give you the daily trappings of being a parent. It will not give you everything you need to know to be an amazing parent. Same thing as being an
Yeah.
amazing partner. Like, you have to experience it. You have to, and you have to have good
Yeah.
coping mechanisms and good things that help you with that. But like, you're not going to get the cliff notes and every single thing down. But as a host, you have to recognize, am I this type of host, that type of host? And then just how much time
Mhm.
you want to put into it. I feel like, are you like,
Yeah.
are you good at reaching out to people? If there's a guest show, are you great at finding guests, talking with guests? If you're going to do just kind of a solo cast, do you feel weird just speaking into the void or not? Or do you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah.
Those are just, I think, a few things, to like write down and think about, like,
Yeah.
look at myself about this.
Two things on that. Cause one, the comparison to being a good partner. I just got married back in June this year.
Congratulations.
And boy, do I feel that deeply. Thank you. I was just like, oh man, that's so real. The second note is like, I completely agree with you. Something that I do, slightly different as a podcast host who does interview a lot of people is I love to do not extensive because I think that can get, again, very slippery slope, but I do a fair amount of research on the person, like listening to another episode that they've been interviewed on, or looking at their website, kind of following their story, seeing what they stand for on platforms. And I like to find, because one of the things I love to do is explore what is the imperfect side of your quote unquote success story. What is the side that, wasn't so pretty or wasn't the overnight success that we hear a lot to this day? And so I like to find those little moments and ask them about it and be like, hey, like I saw that you had this experience. Do you mind telling us about it? Or stuff like that. And that instantly right there, I think kind of wakes them up is a good way of putting it. Like when you're on a podcast and it is a very scripted, it's the same 5 questions that you get asked everywhere. Who are you? What do you do? What would you recommend? Blah, 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 blah. It's the same questions. And there's a part of the guest that just goes on total autopilot. So one of the things, I actually totally stole this from Tim Ferriss, so I want to give credit where credit is due. One of the things I like to do is do research and kind of ask them about these different moments, and not to like call them out by any means, but to let them know like, hey, like I'm really interested in learning about you. And what that does is it wakes them up on the call and kind of turns off that autopilot so they're present in the conversation. That has been really beneficial. And I'm toying around with a new format around that right now, but the format that's been working has been working in my manner. Again, this is from my show, but yeah, there's so many different avenues that you can go about it, but I think presence is the common thread here. Like making sure that you, the interviewer, and you, the guest, are able to be present and have that conversation without being like, okay, I'm going to give my standard answer. Okay, what's for lunch? Da 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 da.
Yeah, it's funny. I respect anyone's approach that works well for them. I think mine is very opposite of most people's. I literally want to know almost nothing about the person. And even when they tell me things, or like yourself, like you send me an email and all this stuff, I never look at it again after. I don't look at their website, nothing. I just wanted to be like, we literally just like bumped into each other. And one, not that I think it's better than anyone else. I don't. That's just what I prefer. I just feel like it challenges me to be completely in the moment. I'm like, it challenged me to have to really listen and think on my feet when I do this. So I have almost no background, and they'll send me like the podcast form that I have, and like I copy paste it for the notes and stuff. But honestly, I don't read it. I really don't read it. I'm just going to be purely honest here. I don't read it. I don't skim. I don't look at I put it in there for the benefit of the show and listeners to check it out, but I don't investigate it. I just really don't want to know, because I honestly don't really want to know what the person does that much professionally.
Yeah.
My podcast is all about knowing the human behind the work. And so that's why my show is always very different for a lot of guests, because they're like, well, we didn't talk about like what I do professionally that much. I'm like, yeah, you could do that somewhere else. Like that's a scripted podcast. And like, tell me what you do. Tell me your job. I'm like, no, I want to know about you. And like, or let's just riff on some random shit like for a while. Like it's just, it's like, that's what you do.
Yes.
You kind of go around in different areas and you start talking about your dog, and then you start talking about a little bit of this and or whatever, your relationships. And you just bounce from one thing to the next. And I know it's not coherent for like your work, but this isn't that podcast. It's just not that.
Mm-mm. Well, one of the things you and I were talking about before we pressed record was how the race for the busyness, basically, that the society is preaching day in and day out. And you mentioned how you have like these nice big blocks of time to like chill, watch TV, do fucking nothing. You know, it's like a part. Can I cuss on this podcast? I forgot to ask.
Whatever you want.
Amazing. I figured, but I always want to check. But that right there, I like to always phrase it this way. Again, I work with a lot of people who praise themselves consistently for being busy. They are talking to a person. Oh my gosh. Hey, how's it going? Like, what are you up to? Oh my God, I'm so busy. And it's like, that's become this new status symbol. And one of the things I started doing really last year, but I've been really actively diving into it this year, is no longer being busy. If I'm busy, I am doing something actively wrong in my business. I feel like I'm a chicken with my head cut off. I don't feel like I'm a person. I feel like I'm a worker. And that's just not the life I'm wanting to live. And so I constantly am thinking, like, what is it that Nicole wants? Not Nicole, the business owner, not the Nicole entrepreneur, because that used to be like my only way I would describe myself, was like determined entrepreneur, And it was like, who's Nicole the person? And it turns out she likes to read fantasy novels by the pool on a Tuesday afternoon. Like, that is goodness, like just wrapped up in a bow for me. And that's not productive. And I don't care. That's in fact the opposite of productive. And I love it.
I tell you, I had someone on my podcast, gosh, I can't remember their last name, but they're from Chicago, Dr. Devin, and they were talking about, the book is called I think Laziness is Not a Lie. It's something like that, but it's
Laziness Does Not Exist.
By
Devin Price.
Yeah. Devin was on my podcast.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Devin. I've talked to like 8 jillion people, so I forget. And
it's Devin Price is his last name.
Yeah. I have a relationship with Devin. We email back and forth with each other, yada, yada, yada. And Devin was on, and we talked about, it's like, it's good for you to be like just unplugged and not worry about like, well, you know, I hate when people, let me say this. I hate when people go like, I don't watch TV. How could you watch TV? I'm like, who cares? Like, that's what you like to do. You go to your corner and do whatever you want to do. But I like to binge watch a lot of shows and stuff. I'm not going to feel bad about it. No one's going to make me feel bad about this. I enjoy doing it. One time when I was in college, I watched 12 straight hours of The Real World back in the day, 20 years ago. I love it. I had a great time. It was the one day I had off when I was a collegiate athlete on a Sunday to watch a lot of TV. And I really enjoyed it. I laid on my back for like 10 to 12 hours. I moved around here and there, but like, I still enjoy watching a lot of TV. And this whole society of like, I don't even own a TV. I'm like, listen, I own like 4, and I'm cool with it. Like, I'm not pushing this narrative. So, you know, Devin and I have talked about this, and we go back and forth about it and stuff. And I just think it's a really interesting concept that we've kind of compared this to, I don't know if you remember or you're aware of this. I mean, I'm 45. I don't know how old you are, but you look younger than me. So I was like, but I remember when people were like, you sleep, you don't need that much sleep. Like, all these CEOs were like praising each other for sleeping 3-4 hours. And I remember thinking, this is a bad precedent to set. This is stupid.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with productivity. You don't need to be on all the time. You don't need to tell people you're doing a bunch of stuff. In fact, do this. If you're at your computer, I do this, and you find yourself scrolling on something, just say, stop. This is dumb. Why am I doing this? I have the things I need to do for my work. And then other than that, go and do whatever else you want to do. Go take a walk, hang out, you know?
I literally retweet everything you just said. And I think that what infuriates me almost is the fact that we've equated productivity to hustle culture. There's now like this Venn diagram, and the middle between productivity and hustle culture is like, oh, that's where we're always supposed to be. We're always supposed to be productive and working and multitasking. That is the antithesis of what productivity is. Productivity is very essentialist almost. It's like, what's my one thing I need to be focusing on, turning everything else off so I'm able to get into flow state with this, like very like Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, like following that flow state pattern. And it's getting your stuff, quote unquote, done, but in a way that doesn't leave you drained at the very end, so that you can then go live, so you can then go do whatever. Like, and I think that the Silicon Valley culture, the CEOs, like, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a very personal development heavy family. Both my parents worked for like Tony Robbins, who was a big preacher of the 4-hour night sleep. And I was always comparing myself to him and saying like, oh, well, I'm not sleeping 4 hours, so I'm not, doing it right, quote unquote. And then I was like, I'm someone who needs 8 hours of sleep. If I get less than 8 hours of sleep, I'm a bitch. Like, I'm not a kind person. And that, like, so that means like, if I have a terrible night's sleep, I don't do my morning routine the next morning, like at my normal hour. I sleep in, I allow myself that grace. And there's such a push right now for like the, it's no longer even the 5 a.m. club. It's now the 4 a.m. club, because we always have to one up ourselves. Like, and I just roll my eyes at it, because it's like, what are we doing to ourselves? We're making ourselves, another really good book to complement Laziness Does Not Exist, which is one of my favorite books on the planet. I love that you got to interview Devin on that. But is Productivity is for Robots by Corey McComb. Okay. And it's brilliantly written, but it's talking about what is productivity actually, because it's not this like robotic hustle culture that we've made it into. And it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant.
I like it. I mean, I think that humans are struggling with how to exist in a very changing world all the time. Mm-hmm. It's changing way quicker than it was when I was growing up. And, everything we do keeps us plugged into something. So I always tell people like, it's fine to just do nothing. I just don't understand where it turned where like doing nothing was like bad for you. I mean, it's totally fine to like space out and, go do whatever. You want to go shoot some hoops, man. You want to play some video games, have some limitations on things. You can't do like nothing forever. You honestly, you'll feel like you're not doing anything. You won't feel like there's a lot of purpose in your life in different areas, components of that. But dude, it's okay to like lay on the floor and watch TV. I mean, seriously, it's okay to go and, I'm getting off work early, I'm going to go to happy hour. You know what? So what? It's like, just do you, enjoy yourself, but don't, 4 a.m. club. That's insane. I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. for no one, except for my daughter and my wife, maybe. I mean, and even then, that's questionable.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's very questionable.
The only time I'll get up at 4 a.m. is to catch a plane like that, because I love early flights. I'm like one of those unicorns who really enjoys flying somewhere early. Yeah. That's it. Like, other than that, it just is so not worth it to me. And like, I was reading a study. Oh my God, I'm totally forgetting the name of it, but it was basically saying how children these days, specifically like middle school to high school age, truly don't understand the meaning of boredom anymore. Of course. Like, when we would go to recess and everyone was like, I don't know, what do you want to do? We'd go swing and like all that kind of stuff. But there are times where I'm just like, I'm so bored. And it sucked, don't get me wrong. But like now looking back, I'm like, God, what luxuriousness to be bored. What would it be like to be bored nowadays? That sounds amazing. And I don't think that, and what this study was saying is like, that just doesn't exist anymore. Because we're always shoving more. What AP classes can I be taking? How many sports can I be playing at the same time? I'm talking more in the younger generations. Yeah. For us, it's, how many friends can I see? How many networking events can I go to? There's just I just roll my eyes at it, because it's like, I talk to so many people who are just so tired and so burnt out. And yet they don't see another way, because they see taking anything off their calendar, being bored, having free time as mediocrity or laziness. And it's like, you're not enjoying your life that you're living. Like, you're trying to get to a certain level so that then you can enjoy your life. And it's like, what's that for? Because it's never going to happen. And that normally like wakes them up. And it's like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. Then it's like, okay, what do you want to do? They're like, I don't know.
I think too is like adding to that. There's just not like when you're really young, you just don't think about dying. And I've said this to a lot of people. I think it's a good, this sounds very grim, but it's a good practice to think about that you'll be dead one day, because it will provide an urgency, but also perspective in enjoying your life, which I think is really important. When I was in my 20s, in college, I took a death and dying course in my master's, and I had to volunteer at a nursing home. We've just had a lot of special experiences in my undergraduate and graduate studies. And I think it really made me understand. It's like, man, this is just a blip in time. I mean, the cosmos is not going to remember me. Most humans will never remember me hundreds of years from now. And time is very limited. So you better get to living and enjoying. I'm a big enjoy your time guy. I'm big time. I'm like, if there's a party, Darian's going to be there probably. I mean, I'm going to be ripping it up. I'm making memories. I'm not worried about, like, oh, what if I did this or that? I'm just like, listen, I just want to have a great time. I want to party. I want to be responsible. I want to accomplish things in life that'll make me feel good about, my time here. But man, I want to have a great time too. And you can't have a great time if you're on the wheel all the time. You just can't.
My husband and I, after this, I have one more thing, and then we're actually taking, for our wedding, we got this like double hammock that you can just like hook up to two trees. And we were like, you know what? We both had light days today. Like, let's go just like lay outside. It's like a gorgeous 72 here, and it's perfect. At least it was last time I checked. And just like go and like lay out and just relax, like at random on a Tuesday. And he's now really deep in like the job hunting grind. He's in tech and got affected by the tech layoffs like crazy. And so he's been like hitting the pavement like insane. And I'm just like, we need a break. Like, let's go do something that is solely for our souls, not for productivity, not for our careers, not to get ahead, just like solely to just like lay down and do nothing. And he like, his shoulders like slumped. He's like, that sounds really great. So sometimes it's nice to have cause he reminds me all the time, like, if like I'm like, there's still moments where like my old perfectionism definitely comes up and flares. And, I'll be saying like, oh my gosh, I should be doing more. I should da. And he like grabs my shoulders and he's like, you do not have to be doing anything to be worthy. And it's like to have that kind of dichotomy in a partner or a friend or a parent or something like that, but to be able to call that out in another person in a very loving and compassionate way is something that I never thought would be one of the pillars of this very foundational love that we've created. And that has been majorly beneficial for both of us.
Yeah, most definitely. So this is newlyweds here, still here. This is
very
amazing.
Newlyweds.
My goodness.
It's funny because I say newlyweds. We've known each other for 11 years.
Okay.
And we've been living together for 4. We've been dating for 5. So newlyweds, yes. But I was saying to someone who was asking me, they're like, oh, like, how's the newlywed phase? How's everything? And I'm just like, it feels no different. It feels the same thing.
Yeah, a long time.
Even I've known him so long, and the only thing is just like, oh, now I like see a ring on his finger, and I'm like, oh, look at that, that's there. I put that there. That's exciting. So that's really like the only big quote unquote difference, and like changing my name and calling him husband. Those are like the like gives a little butterflies, and that's always fun.
That's fun. I'm going on 20 years here being married. Been a long time. And
oh my gosh.
Yes, it's been awesome. It's actually been really rewarding. And I see the way that we've changed throughout the years, because man, that does happen. It definitely happens. But it's been in a positive way, not a negative way. And I think just the evolution of people as they grow was really interesting. I'm sure like you see this in your work and stuff, and I do in mine. Is just if you're around someone long enough, you will watch them. Watch them grow. And now how they grow is very interesting. is this in a way that's is propelling you towards better things and a deeper understanding of self and other person you're with, and being more gentle, being kinder, more loving, more understanding? Or is it just you're moving in a very different direction? Because whatever you plant and however you tend to it, you're going to grow it. And I look at it as gardening. I'm a big gardener. I love to garden. It's one of my first things I do when I wake up in the morning. Check on my plants, that they need water. I speak to them. I touch the leaves. You just tend to the garden. And it's the same thing with the relationship. If you don't tend to the garden, the plants die and they wither. It's the same thing in a relationship, or any type of relationship that you're working with for that. So I'm curious, like, what are some things you do in your relationship with your husband to tend to that, to really grow it?
It's funny. We've had periods of our years together where the garden was shriveled up and there were weeds growing in it. And then you had to go and hack out the weeds. And man, is that laborsome. But then you're left with this beautiful, fresh soil, and you get to decide together what you're wanting to plant. And some things that have made a big difference for us, taking us from weed moments to like luxurious purple, like perfect tomatoes, that's what I think of when I think of a garden, is we carve out very specific time to be together in a quality manner. So, and I hear this pretty often, and I think there's a reason. But like, for instance, Sunday mornings brunch is us time. Like, that is sacred. Nothing happens during that. If we get invited to something, sorry, can't make it. That is our time together. I also think doing things, we're big family people. So doing things with our family has been really helpful for both of us. But right now we're in this period where like, I'm kind of off doing a little bit of my own stuff, but he's off doing his own stuff. But then we come together and we get to talk to each other about it and support each other on that. That's been a really big thing, is like, if I'm a big deep dive person, like I love finding something and then diving layers and layers and layers deep into it. And then I'll go to him and just like word vomit everything at him. And he just like sits there and listens and like, yeah, absolutely. Tell me more. Like, oh yeah, absolutely. And just like, even if he couldn't give a flying fuck about what I'm talking about, he literally was like, he's like, I want to support you in your excitement for it. And that is something he does far better than I do for him. And it's something I am personally working on. But he's just such a wonderful soul in that way. But that has been really big for both of us, is supporting each other's excitement and not immediately being like, oh, like you could have been doing this, or like not judging the other person or looking at the ways that they weren't quote unquote measuring up to what our image of them should have been. That is a habit that we've really tried to nip in the bud. And sure, it flares up sometimes, but for the most part, that has been the biggest catalyst to changing the dichotomy of our relationship.
That's good advice. Very good advice. I mean, I think it's important to be very honest about yourself with another person, and obviously listening is really important, and talking about the things you're not great at, and just trying to improve, for yourself and the other person. I think it's just, you're with someone for a long time, and it's a real journey. And then if you have children, and that, you might as well just be dropping an atomic bomb in your life. And I'm like, not joking. I only have one child.
Yeah, no,
we have one child. And I'm like, I don't know how people do this many times over. I'm like, I'm good with one. We just have one child. She's almost 12. I'm just like, the amount of effort is unbelievable. But I was also very honest. Like, I felt pretty, after I was like experiencing it, I was like, I don't think this is for me over and over again. And having that discussion, I think, was really important with my wife. Also, I realized I'm kind of a selfish person too. Like, there's things that I want to do that I know I will not do if I have several children. And sometimes people may knock stuff like that, but at least I'm just honest with myself. I'm like, I understand about that. And I know that I'm going to give up certain things. I'm okay with that, but I don't want to give up like 10, 20 years of doing some other things for this. And I look as like, well, at least I'm being honest instead of like just going, well, being unhappy about what I got myself into for that.
Mhm.
So I'm a big believer in it's like, listen, you got to sit down with yourself. You're the one, you're going to have to do all this work. I mean, whether
Yeah.
you have a child or
Yeah.
not, or you get married, that decision to get married, like you're about to enter into a lot of work, like a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
don't make it a frivolous decision, man. Like you're about to enter a lot of work, a lot
Mm-mm.
of good stuff. It's going to be some bad times, but like this is the
Yeah.
whole self analysis. Like, is this something I feel like is for me versus just
Yeah.
throwing yourself into it? Like, hey, yeah, let's do it. It's a good time, man. And like, okay, it's like the wedding versus the actual marriage. The wedding is actually fairly
Yeah.
irrelevant. It's actually fairly irrelevant. It's a good time, but it should be like, 3% of your whole excitement of the whole thing. It's really not that big of a deal.
I heard a joke one time, or it was like someone saying how they really want to get married, but then they're worried that they're going to post the photos on Instagram or post
Yeah.
photos on Facebook, get the likes, and the right as the likes start to die down, they're going to be like, oh my God, that's the whole reason I did that.
Wow.
And I heard that joke and I laughed and I was like, I could not find this more on just like a totally separate path than I am. We very specifically actually had a teeny tiny wedding. It was like 30, 35 people.
Yeah.
And we wanted it to just be like, this is us celebrating with the core people in our lives. And then we start the marriage. And like, that was the big thing for us. And that was a popular and unpopular opinion. I'll be straight up honest with you. There was definitely some lash, and that happens. It is what it is. But one of the things that him and I both did, and he did this a lot more extensively than I did, but we both had very intense rock bottom moments in our lives before we came together. And as a result, we both went through our own therapeutic journeys.
Yeah.
And that seeing your partner tackling their most inner demons and still at the end of the night kissing them and saying, I love you, and knowing that there's going to be brighter days ahead was one of the bravest things we've both done for each other. And I know we're not done.
No.
And that's okay. But to have faced some of that already makes us both look at each other and be like, yeah, we got this. We know how to link arm in arm and crawl through the mud together. And I think learning how to do that prior to marriage, but also just like in those first, 5-ish years together, that was invaluable to learn how to interact with someone that way. Cause that was foreign to me prior to this.
Oh, really? Interesting. Well, so you said foreign, like, give me some background on that.
I had never worked through something like that with a partner before. We can, or we don't have to get into this, but I've been in abusive relationships. I've been in situations where it was not good for my mental or physical well-being. And those were never from a place of love. They were never from a place of let's link arms together. That was from a place of let me push you into the mud and like watch you squirm. And so I had those situations. I also had situations where there was a person who put me on this hugely high pedestal. And the second conflict happened, I was like, I don't think I actually love you. I think I love the idea of how kind you are to me. And so I had never been in a relationship where it was like, we need to work through stuff together because we want to be with each other. I don't want to say we want to fight for each other because that sounds a little like drama at love. And that's too notebook for me, in my opinion. And I can't stand that.
It's too notebook. It's not
my MO.
I love that.
That's too notebook. But for me, it's looking at it more like I believe in the vision that we have together. And in order for us to get there, we might have to get some scars, and that's okay. But it's always him and I knowing where the end result is that we are heading towards, or knowing the values that we hold at our core. And those are always being aligned. So that's what I mean by foreign to me. It was something that I had never practiced. I had never seen that in my parents. I'd never seen that in a relationship. And that was something that we kind of had to like build the airplane while we were flying it, sort of thing.
Yeah. You know, so what's interesting, it's like the model of what you see in relationships before you get into one that's really serious. And I think I was very fortunate because my parents modeled a very healthy relationship. You know, they've been married for almost 50 years, very long time. And every time I go back and visit them, it's always still very healthy and very loving. But you know, they were never rude to each other. That was one thing I always remember growing up. My parents were never rude to each other. They never talked poorly about each other. At least at least to my brother and I. They never did it in front of us, you know. But like they had a lot of respect for each other, and they also respected the fact that they would never do that in front of us, and create like sides and stuff. So it was always like I saw a lot of commitment, respect, love, sacrifice, um, appropriate arguing, like that understanding how to argue. And then I facilitated that by learning more about that in college and courses that helped me learn how to argue appropriately, things. And so I think like I had a good model, but I feel for people who had really toxic parents who just didn't like each other or talked poorly about each other, yelled at each other in front of each other. And then yelled at the kids. Like that's got to be very difficult to overcome if you're not seeing a good example, you know?
Yeah. I think that's major. And I'm fortunate in a similar vein that I grew up with two parents who loved the daylights out of each other.
Yeah.
I never saw them argue or approach conflict in a way that we would deem quote unquote healthy. And I think that that's why, like, anytime it was like anytime it was conflict, it was like avoid it at all costs until there was something that I was like, truly like, I believe in this, full stop. And, you know, I have a bunch of friends whose parents were divorced or, you know, one parent was abused or something like that. And they, for the life of them, cannot figure out how to make a healthy relationship. And that equally, I see that and I'm like, God, that is just like, that's our default inner blueprint, taking the reins right there. And it's so hard. But luckily, most of them are kicking ass in therapy and stuff like that because they know and they're like, I want to address this. So that I feel like is the biggest step and one of the biggest step ones.
Yeah, most definitely. It's you know, life is difficult. You know, your first contact, you know, we often talk about first contact about like space and things of that nature. But I mean, the true first contact always happens parentally. And that first contact is really critical. It doesn't mean that it is what you become your entire life, but man, it surely shapes a good portion of it early on. And surrounding yourself with people who have very good interest in you and are lifting you up instead of pulling you down. I mean, there's just a lot of pits and valleys in life. And so, you know, once you become kind of aware of self and how you live in the world, you know, it's how are you improving yourself? I'm a big improvement person. How do I keep improving? Getting better. I've not arrived. I have not arrived. I'm always a work in progress.
None of us have.
No, nobody ever arrives, you know, even if you're whatever your version of success, if you're really high in that, you still haven't arrived. And so I think that working on the self is really important. Be aware of yourself. And I feel like I keep coming back to that critical analysis of self, because I think what we're seeing a lot is a lot of deflection of the self right now. I had a solo cast that I said kind of the hoax of infallible leadership. And one of the things I can't stand the most is when people are in leadership positions. We all are kind of in a leadership position in some way in our life. Just can't admit when you're wrong and realizing that like maybe you contributed to yourself being in a bad place, you know, taking the accountability. It's like we're trying to just curate this picture that we didn't do anything wrong or somebody else did. That's why we're in a bad situation, because somebody else did me wrong. Like, well, maybe you did stuff wrong too. Like, That's a good part of marriage too, by the way, people. You need to admit when you're wrong.
Yes. I could not, I know I'm new at this, but I could not agree more on that front. Well, so I'm curious, in this current chapter of life that you're in right now, what are some ways that you're leaning towards self-improvement?
I think for me, it's always like understanding who I am, and who I am is not the profession that I'm in. I think there's a lot of ego in defining yourself through your profession. Because it's like someone said, well, who, if I ask, I like to ask people like, well, who are you? Oh, well, I'm a doctor, or I'm this. No, you're not. I'm like, who are you? Like, reach down deep inside. Are you, your definition of self, if it's defined by the things that you work on every day, why don't you define yourself as like a very kind person, someone who's empathetic, someone who's a very loving spouse, a good brother or sister or whatever? Like, if I would rather those be the things I'm remembered by than whether I was a good fitness professional or not. I'm like, and so I never, when people, I always tell people I'm not a fitness professional. Like, I don't identify, it's the work I do, but I am not that thing. And I said, I work in that arena, but man, I want to be defined as someone who has high integrity. That's who I am, an integrity-based person who finds a lot of flaws in himself and is trying to gather reputable resources and things to improve. And and I think filtering, at this point in my life, I'm doing a lot of filtering. And I think like that's wisdom. A lot of young people want to have wisdom, but you don't get wisdom without living longer and having the experience. You cannot have wisdom without experience. You need to gain experience, and you need to like see things happening. I always use a sport analogy of like with Tom Brady, who recently retired. Is like, well, the game was easier for Tom Brady because he had seen the same coverages for like 20 years. He was in the same offense for like 20 years. Like, everything was easier because he had already seen it. He had wisdom. He knew what was coming. You can't know what's coming and have wisdom if you've never seen it before. You don't know love if you haven't experienced it. So you need to have, I think, really just figure out, for me, who am I? Like, ask that question. And is it based off of like different things like integrity, listening, supportive, encouraging, or am I defining myself by the job that I do? And I'm trying to get away from the job that I do. It's the profession that I'm in, but it is not who I am. And that, I think, is a big portion of my current stage in life.
I had a therapist who asked me, like, God, I can't remember the exact phrasing of the question, but it was something along the lines of, who are you? Like, how would you define yourself? And I started going to my old definitions. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a hard worker. I'm determined. I'm da 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 da. And she was like, stop. She like put a hand in the air. And I was like, oh no, I failed therapy. Like, oh God,
you failed, Nicole, first day.
I was so nervous. But then she was like, who is Nicole? Like, how would you describe Nicole the person? And I immediately burst into tears.
Whoa.
Because I was like, I don't know. I truly don't know. And that was a major wake up call in my in my life, because it was like, oh my God, like, what would that actually look like? And that alone has been a leading question for me. I'm going to say specifically in the last few months. Like, my first half of the year was very much leading up to the wedding. And now it's kind of like, now that entire project is off our plate. That sounds so unromantic.
Hey, that about that project.
Day. I loved it. Our KPIs on it, like, oh God. But like, now that wonderful, amazing day is off, is in the past, which we're really grateful for. It was a full, wonderful day, but we're glad it's done. Now it's like, okay, now I get to really look at who is Nicole the person and how can I feed her soul? And it goes back to what are things that, if it was not for productivity in the slightest, like if productivity was just not even a word in this vocabulary right now, what would you want to do? Yeah. And that has led me to really step away from a lot of projects. It's a lot of boundaries have been put in place the past few months, which has been awesome. Yeah. I love boundaries now. I'm becoming like a boundary junkie now. It's
great.
Pretty great. Like,
yeah,
it's great. I love it. And the irony is that has actually led to more work opportunities, but more of the ones that I want to put my time into. And I say irony, like I didn't expect that to happen. I hear stories constantly about like, oh, if you do less than the things you actually want come on your plate, or like, gets handed to you on a silver platter. And I think the busyness addict in me didn't believe it. But now really leaning into that has been a game changer. And so I don't think I'm by any means done. I think I'm actually barely dipping my toe in, but that has been a very fun exploration of what this next chapter looks like.
I love it. Well, this project is over for today. But I'm gonna throw down a challenge that I think that there's a lot more to talk about. So I think there needs to be another chapter of this episode, because
I love it.
I felt like more. I was like, wait a minute, there's more here. Time's up. I don't like that. So if you're down, it's would love to.
Definitely down.
All right, she's down. Okay, we're gonna make this
definitely down. That sounds awesome.
Part 1 here. So happy about it, Nicole. It was so nice to meet you. And last thing I wanted to say is, Nicole did something that I value quite a bit when reaching out to someone. Besides, checking out the show and stuff, you were just really excitable. Like I felt the excitement in the email, and the sincerity, and the vulnerability. Write more emails like that to people and communicate. Like, don't pitch me, for the love of God. Stop pitching me.
Please don't.
Please stop with these business pitches of this person can talk about these 20 things. And Nicole was just super honest and vulnerable.
Thank you.
That I always pick people on like how it makes me feel. Make me feel something about you, and like in a positive way. Like, don't make me feel like this is not good. I just don't want to deal with this. So thank you.
You and I are very much the same. And that really means a lot, because that is a foundation of the person I want to be, and the type of profession I want to be a part of as well. Like, so that really, I can't even tell you how much that means to me. Thank you. And as someone who also gets a lot of those email pitches of like, hey, this person just wrote a book, and like, blah, 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 like, I'm going to echo everything you just said. If anyone listening is also in this industry, is also pitching people with podcasts or pitching people with any kind of business project, for the love of God, make it personal. It is so much better as someone who reads those emails as well.
Most definitely. Well, please let everyone know some ways they can connect with you, and then we will be off and running the rest of the day here. Yeah.
Amazing. Like I mentioned, I have a podcast. It's called Imperfect Success. Anywhere you're listening to podcasts, probably where you're listening right now, you can find it on there. I also have a Instagram, which is probably where I'm most active in the social media space. And I'm there at Life Coach Baker.
Perfect. Nicole Baker, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.